World Health Organization says that we need to grow way more food by 2050. We need to grow more food by 2050 than human civilizations have grown throughout recorded history, right, to feed growing populations. And so I really was looking at agricultural-based stuff. And, well, we don't have a lot of flat land here, right? So a lot of big ag programs they're out of reach. We don't have the resources. And so I was kind of looking through, well, what do we have? Well, we have a lot of lumber, we have a lot of sawmills, we have a lot of mines. In the 3-county area, there's over 400 coal mines that aren't in use. And mushrooms really need a couple of things. They need something to eat, like wood, sawdust. They need a stable temperature, and they need kind of humidity. They don't really need much light. They're actually a lot closer related to animals than they are to plants. And so, we don't have to go through all these hurdles of making sure they have enough light. We just need somewhere cool and dark and kind of wet that we can put them to grow. And so it just seemed appropriate that, can we grow them in these coal mines? We have a large worker base that are used to working in mines, and we have a lot of unused spaces. So can we kind of recycle some of these spaces and turn them into functioning kind of mushroom farms? The project really has kind of 3 parts. Can we grow them, right? And can we grow them at what we call a good biological efficiency, which means, does it make sense? Are we getting out enough mushroom for it to make sense, economically? What mushrooms can we grow? So right now, we currently grow about 14 different varieties, and we have cultures. So we have the DNA on, I don't know, upwards of 40 now. And so the mushrooms that we grow are almost exclusively Appalachian genetics. They're mushrooms that we collected here in the wild, and we brought them back to our lab and we cloned them. Can we grow those? And then can we grow mushrooms using waste? Okay, so sawdust. Can we use sawdust? We've grown mushrooms so far. We've grown them on sawdust. We've grown them on cardboard. We've grown them on shredded newspaper. We've grown them on spent brew grains from our distilleries, on spent coffee grounds. And so which one of these substrates can we take another waste that was just going to be disposed of, and can we turn that into mushrooms?
So when you mentioned growing 14 mushrooms, does that mean in the lab, or actually you're in the coal mines already?
So right now, the phase we're in right now is to use sensors in mines. And so we have a bunch of pretty advanced sensors that we put in the mines, and they record all of this data for us. So they record temperature, CO2, oxygen, any kind of fluctuations in airflow, humidity, light levels. And we have a couple of environmental chambers that we can match those conditions inside of those chambers. That way we don't have students that have to go into mines. That way everybody's safe, especially if we're using mines that aren't currently in use, right? We don't have to worry about shoring them up or anything like that. We can just check the sensors, that the data gets Bluetooth back out to us, and then we can go from there. So the question to me really isn't, will this work? It's how well will it work? Will it work well enough to offset the costs of turning on these big fans in mines and running the electricity? And we're hopeful, because really the number one kind of economic burden for these mushroom farms is HVAC cost. It costs a lot to heat and cool these things. Mushrooms breathe in oxygen like us, and they breathe out carbon dioxide, and they make heat. And so if you have a lot of these blocks together, you actually have to cool the building down. But if you're underground and it's a relatively, you have the entirety of the earth there to kind of dampen that. And so we really don't know if that will offset the cost of running the fans and all of that. And so really we're interested on kind of the economic feasibility standpoint. And we know that some mushrooms will do better than others. So some of them we know probably won't grow. We'll test them anyway to see. And we know some of them like the cold and may do really well.
So of those that are likely to do well in coal mines, any names I would recognize?
Yeah, so there's lots of oyster mushrooms. So blue oysters, pearl oysters, the maitake, the hen of the woods. Those typically would do really well. Lion's manes, coral tooth, bear's head. Those will do well in the cold. This is one of our spaces. Our bigger tents are will be off-site. For instance, this is a lion's mane that the student has not put into fruiting yet, but you can see that the mushroom's trying to form.
Do you personally have a favorite mushroom?
Oh yeah, maitake. The maitake. A lot of people would say maybe morels, the dryland fish, morchella. Those are really good too. And so this one actually just got put in yesterday, and so it's not pinned yet. So what I mean by pin is basically we cut a little tiny hole in this bag, and the bags, they mimic the forest floor, right? So when you think about a mushroom, they're growing on the forest floor. When you think about that little stem that they get, really what they're doing is they're trying to get out of the CO2, right? Because in the forest floor, the CO2 is going to sink to the bottom. And so they grow those stems to try to get away from that, to get to fresh oxygen. And we manipulate that in the bags. But what we've done here is this block was ready to fruit. So we sealed it down, got all the air out of it, and then we cut a little tiny hole, and that's fresh oxygen. So now instead of making that really long stem trying to find fresh air, it doesn't have to. It'll pin right here, and they kind of look like little tiny baby mushrooms, and then they'll just form caps. So we don't want a whole lot of stems because most of the time people want to eat the cap of the mushroom. Today, especially in North America, we really only eat, as a population, we're kind of mycophobic, right? I mean, growing up, I could tell you, recount many times where my grandmother and my mother would be like, don't touch that, it'll kill you, right? And so people were afraid of mushrooms, they didn't know. And so we really only eat about 4 or 5 different types of mushrooms, maybe 6, right? And so we're really not that experienced with them. And so in a lot of ways, mushroom farming hasn't advanced in 150 years, really, right? People are still growing the same way they grew 100 years ago. But now, with people kind of cracking the code on some of these more specialized varieties and people getting more creative with their diets, I think the next 10 or 15 years, you're going to see a pretty big radical shift. There'll always be a place for the button mushroom and these other mushrooms that have been grown for centuries and will continue to be grown. There'll always be a place for that. But I think now more than ever, smaller operations and even larger operations can shift into these other mushrooms and really make a name and really advance the field quite a bit. Mycology is in a lot of ways in its infancy. Okay, a lot of fields, like if you want to go out and discover a new bear, that's really hard to do, right? They've been doing that for a long time. Mycology is we're still in the discovery phase. In a lot of ways, we're 300 years behind. And so the future of mycology is exceptionally bright because as a scientist, there's just any direction you want to go, there's discoveries to be made, right? And so it has nowhere to go but up. And as a human population, we need to grow more food. We need to utilize space more efficiently with less resources, grow food quicker. Mushrooms check all those boxes, right?